Ian Baring-Gold will be moderating this next session where we talk about the status of wind diesel systems worldwide. So I'm very excited to see what's been going on over the past few years. So to formally introduce Ian, Ian graduated with a master's in mechanical engineering from the University of Massachusetts Renewable Energy Research Lab in 1995 and started working at the National Renewable Energy Lab. Ian's work at NREL has been focused in three primary areas: applications engineering for renewable energy technologies, assistance in RE uses, and educational outreach for renewable energy technologies, primarily wind. Ian sits on the IEA and IEC technical boards, and he's an editor for Wind Engineering and has authored or co-authored more than 60 publications. Ian's currently working at NREL in Colorado, leading the wind technology development team, and more recently is director of the Wind Powering America program. So Ian, I'll let you come and take over. I'll let you introduce the presenters.
So I'm going to give a quick introduction to kind of the global market, why we're all talking about this. And I think it's a little bit of stage setting. And then for the rest of the session, we're going to pop around the globe to see what different organizations have been doing to kind of get a sense of where we stand in the world. But a little bit of stage setting here. Certainly people who spend time in rural communities understand this intrinsically, but I think it's pretty important to kind of go through this as we talk about why we're moving this forward. So here we have the Earth, and the Earth is dominated by human needs, the stuff that we all need to be able to do what we do throughout the day. And we interact with a lot of different areas as we move forwards in this. But in all of these areas, energy plays a key role for just our daily lives. It was wonderful being at the session last night with all of the children running around, all of the kids, because that's what we're all that's what all of us worry about. I think is not only our being, but the beings of our kids. And as we go through this, everything that we do is truly dependent on energy supplies that we take advantage of. And I was in Guam a few months ago talking to folks about the need for energy. And in thinking about my kind of discussions beforehand, I was sitting there drinking a nice cup of iced tea, that cup of iced tea that you see right there in the middle. And I started thinking about that cup of iced tea. And sitting on this island of Guam, drinking a cup of iced tea, and the cup, imported. The tea, grown in India, imported. The straw, imported, made of fossil fuels. The cup, also made of fossil fuels. The ice cubes, made of power that was oil-based, that was imported. The water was, they have water on the island, but energy pumps that water out of the ground and purifies it so everybody can drink it. So that something as simple as a cup of iced tea, and in the Alaska context, it could be a cup of coffee, which is what the Alaska context would be. But our communities are completely dependent on imported means, and all of that importation, not only in the energy to create the device, whatever it happens to be, but to even consume it, is dependent on an energy form that currently, especially in rural communities, is imported. And what does that end up doing to the communities that we're looking at? We also have to look at the fact that me being able to have that cup of iced tea on this island of Guam to a large degree is a luxury. And it's a luxury that a lot of us in this room take very much for granted. The fact that we do have that cup of coffee in the morning as we drive by the little stall on Northern Lights is a luxury that most of the population of this planet, our other 7 billion neighbors, don't have, and they all want it. So the idea of the need for energy, not only to meet our needs, but the mushrooming need for energy in the global context is huge. something that National Geographic has had a huge series on recently, looking at the impacts of going from 7 billion people that we have on the planet now to 9 billion, which is what we expect in the next couple of decades, and the impacts that that has on the energy infrastructure for that cup of iced tea, but that bushel of corn, that wheat, that rice that we're all going to have to survive on as we go forward. The energy picture is very complex. It's very complex in a lot of ways, but I think it's important to note that in our context, especially in remote communities, it's complex, but it's also all imported, which means that creates a humongous strain on a local economy. If everything that we have is driven by energy, and all of that energy is imported, that means all of those dollars are exported. And that's not a sustainable model as we go forwards. So if we look at oil production here in the United States, all of us in many island communities, not only here in Alaska, but across the world, are dependent on oil production. And if we look at oil in the United States, we're certainly running into problems. I mean, the discoveries in Alaska clearly have had impacts. Deepwater offshore has had impacts. But I think the trend here is pretty darn clear on which direction we're going. The whole concept of peak oil and exactly where we hit this ends up being critical, and what it's going to do and how that's going to impact the way we exist in our lives going forward is pretty important. So we certainly have something to look at. The age of oil going forwards, we can look at it on a national perspective, which I think is important to do, but even looking on a global perspective. And here we are, and I think the concept of peak oil is pretty well understood. The question is, when is it going to hit, and all of these things. But I think if we put it in context, and again, looking at all the children that were running around yesterday, I don't think it matters. I mean, if we're talking about 5 years, if we're talking about 10 years for this peak oil issue to hit, it's irrelevant. Because what we're looking at is the solutions that we bring to the table today are the solutions that our kids are going to worry about. And whether it happens in 3 years or in 5 years or 10 years, we better get on the stick now, or we're saddling our kids or our kids' kids with a future that is not going to be overly pleasant. And therefore, it's our responsibility to deal with it now that we have the chance to be able to deal with it, and doing anything else is completely irresponsible. Certainly looking at the projections of oil prices over the last number of years is very telling. We're now in this kind of $3 per gallon, and clearly the tie of diesel fuel to world crude oil prices is very direct. I think it's also important to note that in the worst economic recession that the world has seen in the last 50 years, oil prices dropped to $40 a barrel for about 2 days, okay? So the biggest economic recession the world has seen in the last 50 years, oil only dropped to $40 a barrel. I think anybody who's delusional enough to think that oil, the time, we're going to get back to the time of cheap oil is truly delusional. And although I believe personally that here we are at 105 of this morning, that's not something that we'll see long term. At least it'll go down again, but it's certainly not going to go down to $20 a barrel. And I would hazard a guess that we're probably not going to see $60 a barrel ever again. So I think that we need to face this future and face it with our eyes wide open instead of doing the old ostrich approach. And of course, if you don't have that energy yourself, then you have to go out and find that energy. And this gets back to this economics issue of what do we need to do to be able to have those energy services that we require, not only for our nation, but our rural communities. And any other solutions, or a lot of the other solutions, are not pretty. Looking forward to the next 50 years, energy, water, and food. What are the things that a rural community needs? Energy, water, and food. And so this is truly the perfect storm that we're looking at going forwards, and we need to figure out a way to change the ship's direction, or else we're in for a not very pretty future for not only ourselves but for our kids, more importantly. So it's time to change direction of this ship. And a lot of this drives from economic dependence to community. And certainly in our context, where we're clearly looking at community solutions, and wind diesel is one of those community solutions, only one of them, and all of the other ones should be on the table clearly as we look forward. It's something that we need to be very conscious of in the discussions that we have over the next couple of days. And that has a lot to do with strategic planning. So the work that AEA has done over the last 3 years, as James mentioned, the work that the state is doing to try and understand what communities can do, is certainly putting the state of Alaska going in the right direction to be able to understand what community needs are, and then taking the next step to implement those community needs. So with that, let's, as a little bit of context, let's start talking about some of the solutions